I want to be where you are, dwelling in your presence, feasting at your table, surrounded by your glory, in your presence. That's where I always want to be. I just want to be with you. I just want to be with you. That was my grandmother's wish for 12 years when Grandma Guster lost the love of her life, who was Granddaddy Cleo. Granddaddy Cleo died 12 years ago from cancer, and from that day, I remember being at the memorial service for my grandfather. From that day forward, my grandmother longed for, unapologetically, she told everyone, I want to be with Cleo. I want to be where he is. And the thing that stands out to me about my grandparents is that they stood for other people. Their lives were about other people. They gathered wealth and sustenance and ability, not for themselves. They did it for others. Their lives were a stand for others. And that's what I call and encourage you all to do and to continue to do, is to make sure that your lives every day are a stand for others. As my grandparents were a stand for me and my two sisters, and yes, I'm really happy that I survived the abortion attempt, because my mother had a real opportunity to end my life. But when God's sovereign hand shows up, and when God says life, no man can say death. And so for the rest of those 14 years, we lived a long, hard, lonely life, being raised by a single mom. She had her own struggles with drug addiction and these kinds of things. And y'all, we were just poor. Growing up on the streets of Detroit, me and my two sisters, Tessie and Connie, who are a year older than me respectively, we just grew up poor, y'all. Now let me say it right. We were just poor. We were poor. We were poor. We couldn't afford the other OR. We were just poor. And there were times where I just didn't even understand that there was somebody else who wasn't concerned about where their next meal came from. I thought everybody was, I thought everybody's heat was off in the wintertime. And I thought everybody went to school without lunch money and didn't know how they were going to eat that day. I thought everybody went home as a latchkey kid and there was nobody home most of the time. I thought that's the way it was, and so there was really no reason for me to complain. But we suffered. We suffered. And one of the things that we suffered most is that we were left home alone so often. Home alone so often. I don't know, I guess mom had a job, but there was just no food in the house, and we didn't have a lot of the clothes that we needed. And so there was a lot of lack, and one thing led to another, and I'll never forget my sister Connie. It was just one of those days where you're fed up. Like Popeye used to say, you stood all you can stand, and you can't stand no more. Connie had stood all she could stand, and from what I remember, she said there was a confrontation between my oldest sister Connie and my mother. There was a physical confrontation, because when I got home to the house that afternoon, there were books, and there was a fish aquarium that were all in neat order, where everything was in disarray, and everything was all over the living room. The fish were flopping on the floor, the books were soaking wet, and the pictures were hanging off the wall. Something had gone down. And my sister Connie had had enough. She had had enough of the way we were living. And there was a confrontation, and Connie ran out of the house and ran down the streets of Detroit to find a payphone. And she called Grandma. And she let loose 14 years of history that had been held from my grandparents, and they never knew what was going on. They never knew how we were living. Because on the weekends, we'd go to Grandma's house on the weekends, and Grandma's house would be full of provision. There'd be food, and there'd be a huge garden, and there'd never be a reason to be sad about anything. So we certainly didn't want to talk about the sadness that awaited for us in Detroit. We were at Grandma's house, and that was the place to be. And Connie ran to those who provided that safe place. She ran to those, and she called Grandma and told her everything. And I'll never forget the faithful words of my grandfather. I'll never forget those words. Granddaddy Cleo said, Marge, go get those kids. Marge, go get those kids. And my friends, that was the day that my life changed. Grandma left Belleville, Michigan, and she went to Detroit, and she got those kids, and she brought us to her house, and they confronted my mother and told her everything that Connie had said and confessed and everything, and there was a line in the sand drawn, and our lives changed from that day forward because my grandmother and my grandfather took over, and they did what's right. They went and got those kids. And after 92 years of life for my grandmother, Marjorie Guster, after 12 years of being without her husband, Granddaddy Cleo, after a long battle with Alzheimer's and dementia, my grandmother crossed over on last Thursday. And as soon as I'm finished here, I'll be jumping in the car going to Belleville, Michigan. The memorial service is at 2 p.m., and I'm going to remember Grandma. And I'm going to remember and make sure that everyone in that audience knows that Grandma and Granddaddy, they lived for others. Grandma got her wish. She wanted to be where Granddaddy Cleo is. And when I look back on Grandma's life, I know that she has a life well lived. And my friends, it's real simple. Grandma Guster faithfully answered the call. She faithfully answered the call. And that call was, Marge, go get those kids. And our lives changed forever. My question is for you today. Will you answer the call? Will you enter and stand fast in this arena of spiritual warfare? Will you answer the call? Will you go get those children? There are children behind these walls every day whose lives are snuffed out for the sake of someone else's convenience. And although we are few in number here today, we represent a greater number who has greater power than any power on this planet. And I issue a call to you today. Do what you can to go get those kids. They need us. As the Urban Outreach Director of Protecting Black Life, I have given the rest of my life to be a stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. And I ask you, if you will, by a resounding yes, if you will with me, will you stand? Yes. Will you stand? Yes. Will you be the guardian of those who cannot guard themselves? Will you stand? Yes. Will you protect those who cannot protect themselves? Will you stand? Yes. Then, my friends, as we stand together, remember this. If you ever lose hope, if you ever get tired in the battle, if you ever lose sight of the goal, remember this. It is not by power, it is not by might, but it is by God's Spirit that this work will be done. We will stand together to go and get those kids. We will be the guardians of those who cannot guard themselves. We will speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. And we will stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. And we will remember that it is God who will do this. He who has called us, he is faithful. He is faithful. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand has provided. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Lord, Thank you. God bless you.